Welcome. We're so glad that you're here. We have refreshments. I hope all of you are properly caffeinated. If not, you'll work on it. I can tell throughout the morning. Just so wonderful to see all of your smiling faces. A lot of people we've connected with over the past several months in putting all of this together. My name is Ty Smith. I'm the director here of the California State Railroad Museum. I also am on faculty at Sac State in the history department, although I use the museum so often as a laboratory of learning where students learn by doing. We really do think of our institution in a very substantial way as a teaching museum. We have teaching hospitals where aspiring doctors apply their craft. We are building the teaching museum here at the California State Railroad Museum. I have a partner in crime, a co-conspirator. We all need co-conspirators. Now we have a bunch more in the room, so that's wonderful. Our ranks are growing. We're trying to capture this moment because it's so important in terms of developing what we're doing with arts and parks, and so we want to capture this moment of collective dreaming that will lead into a phase of collective doing. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Emma.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma Silverman. I'm the one who's been sending you excessive numbers of emails over the past couple months, but look, you all found your way here through the sort of labyrinth of the Railroad Museum, so I feel I have done my job. I am the Capital District Cultural Resources Program Manager. My title is less obvious, I think, than Ty, so I will explain what that means. That means that I support the team who manages collections and contributes to exhibits at all of our district's museums and historic sites that are not the Railroad Museum, and I work with many of the staff in this room. And like Ty, I also have had a sort of professional story that bridges academia and parks. I was set on the kind of academia path as an art historian, but ended up with a postdoctoral fellowship with the National Park Service, and that totally changed my sort of orientation, and then I was lucky enough last year to find my way here to state parks. So because of our personal stories, we've been really invested in building these bridges between faculty, students, and the work that we're doing here at state parks.
We've been engaged with this work in a variety of ways over the years, but we're really enriched through the experience of being able to tap into a major initiative within California State Parks called Arts in Parks. And so at this time I wanted to welcome the director of California State Parks, who has been so gracious to spend some time with us. Armando Quintero is just a huge advocate of this type of work and is going to participate in part of today's workshop, but also perhaps could give us a few words about the overall picture of arts and parks as a state parks initiative. Thank you. Welcome.
Sorry, I just arrived. I actually have wanted to be an artist since I could draw, since I was like 4 and 5. And I thought that's what I was going to be as I was a kid growing up. And it was art that led me into the world of natural history and cultural history. And so it is art that inspired me to the career that I actually have had in my life. And I know how important this is because it is a way to really capture imaginations, emotion, and connection. And one of the things that I actually, since I started this job, I hadn't done any art. And several months ago, I went on a trip to Año Nuevo with Parks, California. And one of the activities we could do was do a pastel drawing. And I started a pastel painting, and I've worked in that medium before, and ended up doing the first painting that I'd done in 3 years. And I experienced something that I had forgotten, and that is when you're doing art, suddenly, and you're thinking about it, and you do it regularly, the whole world becomes a palette. Suddenly I'm looking at, I can't think of the word right now. I'm still catching my breath from running in here. Everything is a composition. And it's amazing because you're seeing colors and shapes and relationships, and it's connecting. It's how we remember things. And I was Liz, the chief deputy director, and I pitched this idea of having this funding for arts in California parks. And one of the things that I'll say is that in my career in parks, I've done art, I've illustrated guides and things like that. But I also have raised money to take groups of very well-known artists on retreats into the wilderness. And the idea was based on this, and that is in 1900 when President Roosevelt was in office. He actually had philanthropists fund these excursions out west with artists, writers, and scientists. And it was those trips where we really saw the first framing of what these public lands and places are. And I think one of the opportunities that we have by doing this sort of work is to rethink the very work that was done over a century ago and make it contemporary. Because frankly, having worked in parks all my adult life and not going to parks as a kid, and in the Mexican world, when you say, if you go like this to indicate somebody's height, it means you're talking about an animal. And the way you talk about people is you go like this in terms of height. So that's why I did that. And sometimes my words flip into Spanish too, so excuse me. But anyway, when I first started working in national parks, one of the things that struck me was that the language I was reading felt old. And it was like, oh, this is weird. And also what I found, frankly, when I first started working as a park ranger, is a national park ranger, I felt like I was being trained to see the world the way everybody else saw it. And I was like, no, you know, I have my emotional connections to these places, and I've hung on to that. And it's made a real impact in how I experience the places around. I've scuba dived beneath the coast of California many times. I've climbed the highest mountains. I've climbed giant sequoias. I've done a ton of stuff. And it's all from a place of curiosity and beauty. And I think that that's what this is about. It's inspiring the public to bring themselves to these places and to make new connections, because with society as it is today, more diverse than ever, we're dealing with climate change impacts that are creating all kinds of trauma around floods and fires and atmospheric rivers and drought, all kinds of things. And art, too, I think helps us, and I've even used it in my own therapy, if you will, to paint out the things that I'm thinking about and feeling. So anyway, the work you are doing. This is a quote from Barry Lopez. I invited him to go on one of these art retreats, and he couldn't do it. And he sent me the most beautiful card, and this was in 2008. And it was on a manual typewriter. He's a nature writer, one of my favorites, and he's passed away now a few years ago. But he regretted not being able to go on the trip. He was excited about what we were doing. But the last sentence in his note was this: "The work you are doing is work that we cannot do without." That's what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Quintero, and thank you for giving that beautiful talk before you even had a chance to access the coffee and snacks, which I want to point out in the corner of the room. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate that. Kind of sets the stage for the whole mission of Arts and Parks. Before we get into the granular level of what we'll be doing over today's workshop and the workshop in April, I wanted to just really quickly give you all a sense of what California State Parks is. When I started working with public parks several years ago, I'm coming from an academic background. For me, all public parks, national, state, city, they were kind of a blur of cute khaki jumpsuits and wide-brimmed hats, and I didn't really have a sense of the distinction between one and the other. But we are state parks, and national parks has Smokey the Bear, and I don't think have a real functioning mascot right now, but we did have Callie the Quail at one point, who was designed. And we had a whole conversation earlier about bringing back Callie the Quail. And if you ever take a tour of our collections facility, which has many incredible collections of art, material culture, native cultural belongings, but also we have sort of parks memorabilia, which includes a giant mascot outfit of Callie the Quail. So keep that in mind for your classes if you're interested. In any case, California State Parks is, that's the sort of commonly used name for the California Department of Parks and Recreation, and we're 281 park units, from museums like Hearst Castle to the beautiful beaches of Asilomar in Monterey to the redwoods of Big Basin, or the sort of creepy ghost towns of Bodie. If you want to know about the windows there, ask Tim White, sitting at the end of that table. He can tell you in great detail. These 281 parks are divided into 21 districts, and the districts, our superintendent, John Frazier, who unfortunately isn't feeling well today and couldn't join us, but hopefully will, I imagine, be part of the April workshop. He uses an analogy where he talks about districts almost like cities with the superintendent as a mayor. And the reason I mention that is that I know some of you came from farther afield, from Folsom Lake College. And so I just wanted to let you know that, if you're looking at working with state parks closer to your home institution, those may be in another district, like Goldfield's district, and I'm sure they'd be excited to work with you, but it would be a different set of interlocutors. So here in Capital District, we're sort of a relatively small district. Our boundaries are overlaid on Sacramento County and west to Winters, but the majority of our parks are right here in the city of Sacramento, and also West Sacramento. So they're urban parks, not exactly what people think of when they think of public parks. They're thinking of sort of vast acres of wilderness and camping, but all of our park units are museums and historic sites here. So if you open up your packet, there's a sort of informational overview on the right side, and a couple pages in, I did include some information about the different parks that are in Capital District. We'll be visiting over the course of these two workshops all 6 active park units. So today, of course, we're here in Old Sacramento, as you can see out of these beautiful tall windows. We'll also be touring the California State Railroad Museum. Ty will be leading that tour. In April, we'll be traveling in minivans to the State Capitol Museum, the Leland Stanford Mansion, Sutter's Fort, and the State Indian Museum. I did want to sort of flag right here at the start that we have a couple other sites that may be of interest to you that we're not going to visit in person during the course of these workshops. The Governor's Mansion State Historic Park, which was home to 13 governors over the first half of the 20th century, is now being used by Governor Newsom, so it is not open to the public. But if your creative practice is very concerned with the lives of governors in that time period, we do have extensive collections at the Statewide Museum Collection Center that could be relevant, so I want to flag that. We also have the California Indian Heritage Center. That's our newest park unit. It hasn't been built yet, but it's 51 acres in West Sacramento, and it'll be a statewide center devoted to celebrating and preserving the past, present, and sort of living cultures of Native Californians. So that is that site is one that you could potentially do a piece on, although we're not visiting it during the course of the workshops. But again, it hasn't yet been built. So those are the 8 park units. There are also one site that I've already mentioned that is not technically one of our parks, but may be relevant to your courses, is the Statewide Museum Collection Center. It houses, it's out on the outskirts of Sacramento in the old Air Force Base, and it houses 1 million objects. About half of them come from parks around the state. Maybe they don't have their own storage, or increasingly they're subject to climate disasters, and so to keep their collections safe, they send them up to us here in Sacramento to the Statewide Museum Collection Center. But the other half of the storage is from our parks. So for example, Sutter's Fort has about 12 historic collection items on view and another 50,000 at the Statewide Museum Collection Center. So if you're interested in the sort of preservation piece of things or research into those museum collections, that would be a good place to visit, and we could set up a separate tour for you. And lastly, I'll just mention that we also have exhibit shops where our exhibits are fabricated and designs, and the rail yard shops, which are north of here, where oh God, they're not called locomotives, where the trains are maintained. the train stuff, I know, you can tell this is not my area in state parks. Where the train stuff is done, these incredible large trains are preserved and maintained, and so that is also an option as a place to bring your classes. I wanted to quickly point out some state park staff because you will be in a moment or two introducing yourselves to the other folks around the table, but if you don't happen to have a state parks person, I wanted to point them out so that you can find them at lunch or at some other point throughout the workshops if you want to kind of connect, if you think there's an interesting point of intersection between your work and the work that they do. So let's see, I'm a curator in addition to being the Cultural Resources Program Manager, so I'll start with the curators. Curators, will you raise your hand, please? Okay. We have Melanie from the Railroad Museum and Taylor from the State Indian Museum, Sutter's Fort, and the Statewide Museum Collection Center. Let's see, people in the interpretive program. Okay, great. So we have Allison, who's the district interpretive coordinator, which means she does exhibits, visitor services, public programming. Amy, the exhibit designer at the Railroad Museum, and Kim, the chief of interpretation at the Railroad Museum. How about historic restoration? There's Tim. He and his team restore all of our historic buildings. This means things like hand-turning finials for the Leland Stanford Mansion, carving those out of wood, building stairs for Sutter's Fort, and other such activities. Did I miss anyone? Well, you've already met the director. Maybe I'll point out Blythe Wilson, who works not in the district, but at the statewide level, connecting academic institutions and state parks. And also Isby, I've lost sight of you. There you are. Hi, Isby. And Isby works for PlaceWorks, which is the nonprofit organization that is supporting the whole statewide Arts and Parks initiative and does a variety of other work with us. Okay, did I miss anybody? Kate, I know I'm introducing you shortly, so I'm not going to introduce you now for Brady's sake. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. Our wonderful fellows. We started this year a fellowship program for emerging professionals in collections and museum work. And these are our two inaugural fellows. We almost said, should we just call off the fellowship program because we will never have fellows as great as these, but we are going next year. So if you know any emerging professionals who want to work with us, specifically next year with the Railroad Library and Archives, send us their information. This is Sienna Weldon and Miranda Bello, and they've also been invaluable program assistants. We're very lucky to have them. Okay, so that's my kind of what are we and who are we groundwork, and I'll pass it over to Ty.
It's my personal belief, although I don't think you'll find a lot of people who would argue with it, and that is the highest calling of state parks is to be a laboratory of learning. And this extends well beyond the field trip. We're proud of our storied tradition of young people coming in and having that experience where they get to connect these ideas that they're learning in the classroom to a real life place. And I never want that to stop, but I do feel like we have an even higher calling than that, to really be demonstrably laboratories of learning. And I think the existence of fellows, inaugural fellows, speaks to the trajectory of where we're going, not only at the California State Railroad Museum, but also within the larger district. When I came here from Hearst Castle, I used to run the tour program at Hearst Castle, and I traded in my partial ocean view for a partial view of the mighty Sacramento River. But when I got here, there was not an internship program. And I thought, being on faculty at Sac State, I started teaching right away when I got here, that there was just this need to connect higher learning with the opportunity for young folks to learn by doing. And so there was no mechanisms to have an internship program, and so we just figured it out. We just made it happen. And in doing that, I asked people like Melanie Tran, chief curator here at the California State Railroad Museum, people like Kim Whitfield, chief interpreter here at the California State Railroad Museum, to not only do the impossible that we asked them to do anyway, in terms of curating major collection, just all of the things they're tasked with doing, But then I turned around and asked them to be capable and willing instructors and teachers. And at every turn, every person here answered that call to do just that, to help young people and new professionals learn by doing in service of these iconic collections and exhibits, and it's just been such a wonderful thing. And I think that really is a big role for parks. It's so gratifying all these years later to have educators and parks professionals in the room together, because we tend to operate in these circles, these bubbles, and we're putting huge investments of time, energy, effort, love, passion into these things, and then here we are over here in parks doing similar things, and unless we push those circles together and live in the overlap, then something's missing. And so this is really a down payment on activating the overlap of all that we do so that we can do it and do it better together. When we were framing the concept of this project, we tapped into some arts and parks funding to extend the capacity of things we are already doing, like the Great Wall Youth Orchestra. These are students who are learning traditional Chinese instruments, playing music that would have been familiar to Chinese railroad workers. They learn about it, they come on a field trip here, and then they go into our auditorium, or in this year on the 27th, it will be in our roundhouse, and they play that music for the public. It's an expression of public history through public art. We really had those concepts in mind. For public art to be relevant, says Kevin Starr, it has to be rooted in public history. Now, all artists, I would argue, express lived history through their art. Some do it consciously, and then there's the rest of them who do it unconsciously, subconsciously through that work. So we're living expressions of history. And so linking those ideas together, coming together to see how as practitioners, each of us is an artistic practitioner, I bet, and then empowering students to learn about public history and then come and express that public history through a variety of programs. We had things in mind. We had wild ideas that we were throwing around, but we didn't want to come to the workshop with a priori assumptions about what those expressions would be. We really wanted to dream collectively. Think about that. There's a program that is funding us to dream about what we might be able to do in the future. I think it's just such an amazing, amazing opportunity for us to get together and really put some powerful things to work in the world. I think that I'm reminded of the words of Greg Saris, who is the tribal chairperson of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria, who said, the root of all evil is not money, or not even the love of money. It's disconnection. History alone, and I'm a historian, I say this as a public historian, a trained public historian, and that is that history is powerful. History, especially public history, gives us connection. It binds us to something. It allows us to put an anchor into the tempest-tossed world in which we live, and it gives us clarity and perspective as we navigate the uncertainties of the present and the future. But history alone isn't enough, I don't think. I don't think it has all of the tools or even all of the language necessary to express the lived human experience. And so history, public history, rooted to public art, I think gives us a wider range of expressions, a way to actually live out that history in a certain kind of way, but it also allows people to absorb it in a different sort of way. So this is what this workshop is about. It's about us getting together, dreaming in phase one, and then next year coming back with a variety of projects, hopefully, that we can present in front of folks making decisions about where all of this arts and parks money goes, and putting it to work in the world for our students and therefore our community. It's all about community. So that's the higher level perspective on what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Thanks, Ty. So lastly, before we go into introductions, I just wanted to point out a couple other things in your packet. We did include a notebook, and the idea with that, well, it's just nice to have your pretty Arts and Parks notebook. Thank you for coming. But there was a concept behind it, beyond swag, which is that we were hoping as we go through these workshops, you can write down any notes, any points of inspiration that strike you as you're wandering the Railroad Museum today or the other park units at the April workshop. There'll The last piece of the workshops, if you take a look through the schedule, is an open discussion with all of us where we're hoping that you'll be able to bring some of the ideas that came to you and we can kind of talk about how we could move those forward. So please do, bring your notebooks back and use it in that way so that your ideas can sort of have a space to be collected together for further discussion. We also included at the back of the packet that goes over the different parks some contact information for field trips. We thought that would be a pretty likely, hopefully, outcome of these workshops is that you may want to bring your classes to come for trips, for tours. So depending on which park it is you're interested in, there were different contact persons. So I included those on the list there. And we'll be talking more about the opportunities for more Arts and Parks grant funding in April. So we'll have more details about that then, and we'll have more information to share. But we'll be the main contact people if you're looking to apply for grants for specific projects over the next couple years. And I guess obviously, there's a beautiful little pamphlet about the Railroad Museum that you can peruse. And then there's also a flyer for a webinar that Melanie Tran and I are leading in April, which is about museum careers with parks. One of the sort of challenges that we face is just getting new people into parks, into temporary positions, but also into our permanent positions. And so we're really, working to, that would be one way we'd love to connect with you all to kind of get your students that career development, is to be able to send you those opportunities. So this is an informational webinar. It'll be recorded. Please give the information to your students, and hopefully we can get some of them on that path towards museum careers with parks. Okay, I think that's everything.
That's enough for now.
That's enough. Yeah, we've thrown a lot of information at you all. Next week, I know you've been chatting in your pods, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to get to know each other better. So we have a couple group introduction questions here after you obviously say your name, and then let the other folks in your table pod know what brought you to the workshop. And if you were an art supply, what art supply would you be and why? And we did an asterisk if you, as a practitioner, don't identify with the word art supply narrowly conceived. We're talking about any sort of tool of creative production. And I am going to pick on my parks buddies because we had a couple people call out sick. So I see a little glob of khaki over there. If you guys could disperse yourselves to a table with professors, that would be great. So come on over. I think we'll end up with one extra table. We'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes to just get to know each other. And then we'll come back together. Thanks.
Sounds intense. And yeah, working with
So I'm just.
You know what that is? Yeah?
I would be a graphics tablet. I'm a digital artist as well.
Hey, it was so nice to walk around and lurk. The facilitator's prerogative to just sort of creep and over here and eat snacks and stuff. And I just heard a wonderful conversation, lots of laughter. If we stopped here, we would be a success, I think. Just in terms of making these. We're not going to stop here, though. Just don't get it twisted. Did anybody have a particularly fun answer or profound answer when you were answering the question, if you were an art supply or a tool of creative production, what does anybody want to share out? Yeah.
Well, we had a fun one here. We're both theater teachers, and I chose the rainbow pencil, that changes color, and she chose the multicolored pen.
Okay. Peas in a pod. What can you say? The rainbow pencil and the multicolored pen. Okay, very good. Yeah. Who else? Yeah.
My colleague here chose a brush. And I said what was really great about the brush is that you could leave an image on every person that you touch.
Yeah. Wonderful. Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks. Yes.
Alexander chose the dance floor as the foundation for.
Yeah, the dance floor? No parking on the dance floor. That's all I know about the dance. It's the only thing I know. That's the only thing I've learned is there's to be no parking on the dance floor. I love it. Great. Wonderful. Who else? Yes.
I just want to have you share yours if you don't mind.
There's a nomination on the floor? Yes, it's good. Okay, yes.
Bear with me. So I am an art historian, and I said that I really love the idea of like being the blue tape that you put around when you're setting up your canvas or your piece of paper on your easel, sort of like creating the boundaries and being interested in what goes inside those boundaries. And then when you take the tape away, then you sort of expose the what goes beyond the border, and that's also very compelling and very important to my practice. So, a little but I thought it fit, so thank you.
Thank you, fellow tweed wearer. That was palpable profundity in that. I like that too, that moment where you're so hopeful. You're going to create the best thing ever in the world, and then you're soon, maybe not that's going to happen. You're like, oh, it had so much promise. I had it all out, and well, I'll try again afterwards. Emma and I, we were talking about the topic over here, and we are similar too, in that she would be a big blob of oil paint. Maybe it takes a long time to dry. Maybe it's such that you could use a little bit of that to create a different color. And I thought of myself as the artist palette, collecting all these different colors and medium and things like that. So isn't that just heartwarming? Yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Anybody else want to share their tool of creativity? What about another parks person? Yeah, we could call on parks people. We can be Blythe.
Well, I'm not a musician, but I do dabble in karaoke occasionally. So my art supply was a music note. I love music.
Well, and we've attended a lot of trainings together that end up at like the Far Western Saloon in Point Reyes Station or whatever. So I know about the karaoke. Just a small town girl. Okay, well, no, we won't go. We won't get it going. We won't get it going. It'll be all right. It's all right. Don't stop believing. Don't stop. Don't stop. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks all for those introductions, and of course you'll get a chance to mix and mingle as these things go along. We're going to have a presentation here shortly, then we're going to have lunch, and then we're going to break up into two groups and participate and watch an art production, and then also go on an orientation tour of the California State Railroad Museum. Emma.
Okay. Great. So as Ty mentioned, the next thing on the agenda is a presentation. And when we were talking about what should these workshops even consist of, dreaming collectively, what does that look like in practice? We felt pretty strongly that we wanted to have a presentation that could sort of showcase the range of possibilities for arts and parks. Okay, I already mentioned here's what you could do for field trips, but what does this mean? What can artists be doing actually in parks? Because with these workshops, we wanted to not only help you all get a sense of the resources in our parks and get to know us, but also be inspired in your own project generation and have a jumping off point for sort of the next steps going forward. So Kate Bickard and I have a mutual friend in the National Park Service, Charles Tracy, who's the former head of arts partnerships for the National Park Service. I'm now going to make a small plug for something because I'm actually in a room with some people who might read Art Journal. There's a forthcoming special issue of Art Journal on art in national parks that I co-edited, maybe winter or spring of this next year. It's been about 4 years in the making. publishing, as pretty typical for academic publishing. But there'll be an interview with me and Charles Tracy in that issue, so please look out for it. But as Charles and I were, as we did the interview and as we had numerous conversations sort of leading up to that moment, talking about art in national parks, he consistently brought up Golden Gate National Recreation Area as this is kind of the model for what can be done with arts and parks. Look at their website, look at the work that they've done. And so we're so happy to have here today Kate Bickert, who's the Senior Director of Strategic Innovation for the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. And Kate has worked at the intersection of parks, art, and inclusive public engagement for over 2 decades. And she's going to show you so many amazing projects, but I wanted to flag one that will come up, but I think is a real milestone for a transformed understanding of arts and parks. That's the Ai Weiwei show at large, which was installed at Alcatraz in 2014. And to my mind, that show really sort of shifted the public thoughts about arts and parks from, sort of pleasant depictions of scenery to art that makes a creative intervention that engages with histories of sites, but uses that engagement to activate some of the most pressing issues of our shared present. So that's just one of Kate's many accomplishments. You can read about all of them in her biography that's in the information packet. And after I'd reached out, I discovered that she's a member of the advisory committee to California State Parks Arts and Parks Initiative. So that was a happy sort of coincidence. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say as a way of introduction. Please join me in welcoming Kate.
Thanks so much for having me. This is like exactly the group of people that I love hanging around with, people who are interested in this. Just a little bit more about me, because it's, I was talking with Ty, it's funny how sort of things in your life kind of come together in funny ways. So actually, before I started at the Parks Conservancy, which was 20 years ago, 21 almost, I worked for the Rails to Trails Conservancy and spent quite a bit of time here at the Railroad Museum, which was fun. I have an undergraduate degree in U.S. history, and then I went back to school and got a master's degree in urban forestry. And so I'm not an artist. I'm not trained in the arts or arts administration or anything like that, but I've always been really interested in the arts. When I was little, my dad organized an arts festival in Denver that I grew up volunteering at and going to, and then I organized one for my high school, and I've always just been, I love art. So when I started working for the park, I thought, I wonder how to engage that sort of personal passion and interest. So I'll take you through a little bit of some of that. I wanted to just give you a little background on Golden Gate National Recreation Area for those who might not be familiar. How many know of this national park site? Great. How many of you have been there or been to a site there? Okay, so you know a lot about it. But we were established in 1972 as part of the Parks to People movement, really trying to bring national park experiences to where most people were, which was urban areas. So we were one of the first of those. It is one of the largest urban national parks in the world, actually. We're actually now 82,000 acres, extend 40 miles north and south of the Golden Gate Bridge. We have between 15 and 17 million visitors annually, and we have everything from very well-known historic sites like Alcatraz, Muir Woods, to more kind of rural, outdoor, former agricultural sites. And so we've done projects in many of these places. I would say more in San Francisco, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that is. But yeah, so let's just kind of get into it. I'm going to start with a video. that we put together actually with Charles Tracy for the National Park Service 100th anniversary in 2016, the centennial of the Park Service. And I'll play it here, and then it's pretty short.
Parks and art in parks can be so much more powerful than either one of those things alone.
The National Park System was created due to the vision and care of artists for these natural places.
The lands, the open spaces, the areas were really recorded by artists. And the early expeditions that came out west were illustrated through the drawings and the art that reflected nature in those days.
The amazing thing about working with artists in the parks is that they consistently show us new ways of seeing the environment.
That kind of an experience is much more accessible through a creative dance, listening to a sound experience, or if it's some sort of conceptual work that's having you think about the difference between the urban space and the natural space. So it's really about sharing new stories that are less accessible, but also giving people a chance to bring their own stories and bring their own meaning to a space.
We had Ai Weiwei on Alcatraz. The diversity that came with that experience was opinions around incarceration. So it allows people to have a more diverse experience in a location that is sometimes set aside for almost a single significance. So part of the second century of the National Park Service is inviting new generations to national parks, individuals who haven't had the resources to take 2 weeks off of work and travel to Mount Rainier.
A bird blind that's at the Columbia River Gorge presents the story of the Lewis and Clark expedition without being told on this day they did this and this. And you're surrounded by all these birds just around you inside of a bird blind. It's such a beautiful experience and a really good way to understand what the Lewis and Clark expedition really saw.
We need to continuously find ways of enriching the experience of the parks to help people understand why they're important, and to do that in ways that are fun and filled with humor and color and movement that are not what people expect.
As we enter into this second century of national parks, I do hope that we will continue to use art as a way to allow people to understand parks and to really get a sense and appreciation of parks, both to visit and also to be inspired by parks, so they too can inspire other people.
People are more interested. There's more to see. There's more to do.
What are the deeper stories that we've really forgotten in this place? What kind of memory does the place itself hold? How can you listen for those?
Art can help diversify who enjoys and understands the national parks.
And make sure people feel that their own stories are told there.
When I started kind of bringing up the idea of working with artists in parks, some of the folks who I worked with were like, why would we have art in the parks? You know, that's not what parks are about. They're about hiking or bird watching. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, the arts were sort of crucial to the formation of parks in our country. So it's really kind of reconnecting to that history. That was a fun thing to do. Chris Leonards, who was featured in there, is now actually my boss. She's the CEO of the Parks Conservancy. Javier was our intern. We had Art in the Park interns. So I'm going to go through now. I guess what I first want to say is we have an hour and a half for this. So this is not going to be like an hour and a half lecture. I hope that throughout the whole time, you will just ask questions as they come up for you. So raise your hand, blurt them out. Feel free to sort of have conversation with one another as part of that, or with us as a group. And I'm just going to take you through some of these that represent, all different kinds of art projects. So every type of sort of art form, from performative art to visual art, sculpture, public art, and also like different scales and different costs and all kinds of things. And when I was doing this, I was trying to figure out like how to organize these. I didn't really want to do a chronological thing because I didn't know that would be that helpful. So I organized them into sort of categories that in some ways, they're not clean. These things overlap. But we'll sort of talk about projects where what I think of as like artists or art as problem solver for us in the park. The next one is like projects that address an important, timely, relevant contemporary issue and kind of help the public think about and engage in that issue. Weird and wonderful delights, I called them, which are just kind of giving people a new way of experiencing the place, of connecting to the place, the park, the nature, etc. And then projects that can really transform in the public imagination like stereotypical ideas about a place and tap into deeper meaning that can be illuminated by those places. So that's my loose categorization, and you'll see as we go through why they're loose, I say. Before I do that, I'm just going to do a few slides with a lot of text on them that are sort of the I guess just a little bit of the nitty-gritty sort of details of our Art in the Park program, because I think it will be helpful to sort of think about these things as we're going through the rest. So this is the mission for our Art in the Parks program at GGNRA. And Emma, you are free to share these slides with the group too after, so you don't have to take notes that much, or you can take photos, but our mission is to connect our visitors with creative experiences in the park that are transformative, unexpected, and inspirational. And our vision is to work with artists, and I should say, and arts organizations, to engage in creative expressions that open new perspectives on parks, people, and human relationships within park places. And somewhere in here also needs to just be fun and joy. That's really important in parks. I think we can all agree. For us, let's see, I just thought it would be helpful because everybody sort of has a different definition of what a program is. And when we were thinking about this program, people kept saying like, well, what month is it? Or what's the time frame? And we were like, no, this is like an expansive definition of program. So this is what it could include: formal scheduled events, exhibits, activities, tools, equipment, props, interventions that aid and expand visitor experiences in situations that encourage interaction with the environment and other people and encourage unexpected or serendipitous interactions, and design elements that are meant to intentionally activate or engage the public or shape the visitor experience. So engaging artists in some of the physical features in the landscape. For us, it's sort of, these are our 3 Ps of programs and projects, but they're about park and place, which is, what's the story we want to tell or that we think this place has to tell? What ways might we want to interpret that? What problem in the park are we trying to solve? Is there an issue that we're grappling with that we can't figure out that an artist might help us with. People, this is thinking about who's our audience, who are our potential partners, what staff need to be involved, what will the experience be like, how will visitors actually like move through that experience or encounter that experience, what will they walk away with. And then the process, which is, you know, all that logistical stuff, but really important. What are the roles and responsibilities of different people? What kinds of approvals and permits do you need? What other kind of maybe detail, do you need an engineer on a project? How's the installation and de-installation going to work with the site? All of those things. And I think our projects pretty much can be curator driven. So sometimes we'll have a gallerist or a curator that has an idea. They can be artist driven. So artists that will come or that will meet in a cafe and start having a conversation with, or they can be staff driven or sometimes community driven. Like, here's a particular thing that we want to do, a story we want to tell, a problem that we're having. So any of those work for us, and we actually have an application process. It's on our website, and I can give you connections to that if you want. The other thing that's just important to think about is thinking about, do you have any particular criteria that you're using for a project? These are ours, artistic merit. Are there opportunities to engage the public either in the creation of the work, the development of the work, the celebration and enjoyment of it after it's installed, during its run? Project relevance, again, to park and specific place. Appropriateness for a national park setting. This is always like, what's appropriate for a national park setting? But really it means like, I don't know, we don't do things like celebrating beer, for example, or I don't know, you know, things. We can't have graphic pornography in our park, like things that are pretty, you know, most people can agree on. And then minimal to no impact on normal visitor access during installation and deinstallation. So this can be tricky in a public place, but we don't want things to have to close. We can't. I mean, by law, we're open to the public, so we have to be creative in figuring. It's almost an art and form in itself, is figuring out how to do this. Availability of resources. Do we have, you know, the right staff resources and capacity? Does the artist have the right technical team if they need that? You know, just are the resources for this appropriate? Thinking about durability and maintenance, like this is a big thing in parks, because these artworks for us they're out in the public. So like, are they going to last? What happens if there's graffiti? What if a thing falls off? Who deals with it? So those are some of the things. Safety, security, and accessibility, obviously. Some other guidelines for our projects. They should engage visitors, enhance their experience and understanding of the place. Talked about that. They should highlight or draw attention to a unique aspect of the place. This is important, and especially if it's staff-driven, usually it's a clear connection to the park. But sometimes I've had people, after we did Ai Weiwei, for example, I got probably 4 or 5 calls a week for a while from artists who were like, I want to do, you know, it's my dream to have my white bubble art in the cell house of the, you know. And I'd be like, that's my nightmare at this point, because that was a crazy project. But it was like, the first question I would ask is, what does that have to do with the place? And if people can't answer that question, the answer, at least initially, is no. Sometimes it just means they haven't done their homework well enough, but that's kind of a really clear, because we do get a lot of proposals and we do say no to a lot of them, and that is the main reason why. Projects will occur they'll be temporary in nature. So for us, that's a year or less. Occasionally, we will extend, and you'll see somewhere we did extend it for some reason or another. Or if it's a project that is specifically designed for a longer term or maybe even permanent or semi-permanent installation, like in a visitor center or inside where it's just a little bit easier to maintain. Should have minimal to no impact on the cultural and natural resources of the site, and that we should be able to return the site to the condition it was in before the installation, or better after. So sometimes we've actually been able to really make improvements to site as a result of some of the artworks. Sustainability and just environmental impact, so what kind of materials are they using? How are things being recycled or not? What kind of vendors, sustainability practices? So those are things important to us in helping our park meet its sustainability goals. And they should be highly sensitive to accessibility. So really, every project that we do, we go through a whole accessibility assessment to make sure that it meets to every extent possible universal access design guidelines, and then safety, obviously, both for visitors and for staff who might be working at the site or during installation or anything like that. Some of the questions, is there a specific park story? Is it open to the general public? Like, we've had people propose things where it was like, well, it's ticketed. You have to buy tickets to go. That's what they're thinking. We have to think about that. Like, we're a public site. Do we really want that? Or if we do, how might we mitigate that by saying, you can have a ticketed event, but X% of tickets need to be free to community organizations. Is there a regular primary audience? Like, is it mostly for kids or mostly for families, or is it anybody? Because those things change how you manage the project while it is going on. Any big public moments associated with it, celebrations, parties, anything like that. Any impact to regular visitation, when we did Ai Weiwei, we did have to think about how is that project, and I'll talk about it, going to work with the normal flow of the 1.7 million people that go through Alcatraz every year. Special maintenance requirements, super important to know about if it's going to be something that's not, that's going to be there for a while. Or even if it's a performance, like, are there improvements to, like, the trails that need to be made or the fencing along a place? Is it fully funded? Like, are you going to get part way down the road and then, like, we can't do this, or they can't do it, or us together? We do everything in partnership and collaboratively. So let's see, what else? And then any project sponsors. Because we work in a national park, we have to sort of know that up front, and we go through a process with the National Park Service because they have rules about partnership and how partners can be recognized on a site and that kind of thing. Any thoughts, questions, anything at this point? No? Yeah?
Is information accessible to people who are submitting?
Yes, all this is part of the, yeah. And we will spend time with people. In fact, usually if I get a call, I'll tell people, check out the website, look at all the stuff, then call me, or one of the interns or another, there's a few of us that kind of help walk through these, and then we can kind of walk through some of this with you, and you can ask us questions and that kind of thing.
I just had I got to go to see the exhibition of Ai Weiwei's work at Alcatraz, and I thought, this is so cool, this is going to be a thing, they're going to be doing art things here at Alcatraz all the time. I probably know the answer to this, but I'm curious to sort of maybe why that, or if it did continue, maybe we just don't care about it because it's not Ai Weiwei. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll talk about that when we get to that project. But yes, that's a good question. Kim, and then?
So, do you do, this is information available on the website, do you do like regular programs, like seasons of programming, or is it just like, every 6 months we check the thing and see if someone submitted?
We check our website like weekly. Usually it's Friday mornings. And then it's just going live again. We put a pause on a lot of our stuff during COVID. And then we had budget things. And so we're just ramping stuff up again. But the way that it worked is Fridays we would check. We would meet quarterly. We had a schedule on there. Like if your proposal is within 2 weeks prior to this meeting, it'll get reviewed at that meeting. Otherwise, it'll be on the next cycle. We didn't have a specific programming season because it really depended on the project and where and what the park goal was and that kind of thing. So we left it a little more open, I guess. Yeah. Emma.
I may be jumping the gun, so feel free to put this off, but I think it's so interesting that a lot of this sort of contemporary art in the parks is temporary in nature, that it's not like, I'm an artist in residence, I make an oil painting or a sculpture, and then it becomes part of your collection in perpetuity. Like a lot of it, not that that can't happen, but I think a lot of the work that's happened more recently in terms of arts and parks, it's a performance, or like it's an installation that goes away after a set period of time, 1 year or less, which puts more of an emphasis on documentation to be kind of like the afterlife of the piece. Yes. And I was curious about how you approach that in terms of both ownership and who is responsible for getting the documentation out into the world after the piece is no longer physically present.
You know, we try to do, in fact, I just took like a whole box of stuff over to the park archives about all of these projects. So again, it kind of depends on what the project is. We'll always ask for our park partners, are you going to document this in some way? If you're not going to document it in some way, like, are you going to do a video? Are you going to do, those kinds of things? Let's think about how we can do that. We don't have a collection. The park archives will never want to take artworks because there's, this, but I mean, there's so much work required to sort of protect and preserve like artwork in a collection, and the Park Service is just not equipped to do that. So that is one of the reasons that our projects are temporary in nature. The other reason is that we've actually found that people want change in their experiences in the park. So if we do a permanent thing, like that's it. That's the one thing you're going to see. I went to a conference actually to talk about Ai Weiwei. That was the International Association of Amusement Park Operators. Very weird, thing that I would never normally go to. But I was asked to come and talk about this project. And it was it's Disney and Legoland and Dollywood and all these groups there. Really huge, enormous kind of visitor experience providers and entertainment providers. But something there was a talk by futurists that I went to that was super interesting. And one of the things that these are people that study trends in what people want. So they said, here's the things. This was 2018, I think, that I was there. People want communal experiences. They want experiences that are meaningful. And then guess what the third one was? Instagrammable. Right, but we have all of those in parks. I mean, and we have all of them in spades, really. Like communal, collective experiences. There is so much meaning in so many park spaces, and then we all know they're beautiful. Pictures galore. So I was like, that's awesome. We're right on trend. So here we are, starting with artists as problem solvers. This is a project, actually one thing I did want to say is the first person and how I kind of really started integrating this into my work. I was running something called the Trails Forever program at the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which was, as part of the Conservancy, about restoring and revitalizing our parks' trails. Most of our park sites were former military lands or ranch lands, and we called it the accidental trail network that we had there. That was just like former military roads and whatever. but it was also engaging people. Like part of the mission of that particular initiative was to really engage people in the parks, trails, resources, caring for them, learning about the place. And so I started really thinking like maybe art is a way that we could think about doing that engagement differently. And I reached out to a woman named Janine Shabilsky, who at the time was the dean of the San Francisco Art Institute, and there was a little article about her in the Chronicle, and I just wrote her an email. She wrote right back. She's a public historian, so just another little, so she kind of got me started on this. I actually have some handout, things for you to look at later if you want, that one of which is hers. But so one of the trail projects that we worked on, this was in 2006 and 2007, it was out at Land's End, and it was really restoring that. And we had a historic forest out there planted by the WPA that was never, it was planted and then it was never maintained as a forest. So like the trees were planted super close together, they were never thinned at all, and the forest grew up and became this thicket of trees and dead branches and whatever that was not good for the trees. The forest was starting to die. It was problematic for visitors and the trail experience. We had a lot of dumping and illegal activity in this thicket. So we actually had to do some tree management, otherwise known as removal. And people do not like it when you cut down trees, right? And even when you can explain why you need to do it, people still just don't like it. So we had that going on. We also had a situation where a lot of bird enthusiasts got really upset, like, you're going to cut this down, take all this brush away, it's going to be bad for the foraging and nesting habitat of the birds. So we said, fine, we'll just leave all the debris there and the birds can forage. And then the neighbors, because we're in an urban area, really did not like that because it was messy. It seemed like we hadn't actually finished our project. So Janine, who I mentioned, put us in touch with an artist, D. Hibbert Jones, who's a professor at UC Santa Cruz. And she came up and looked at the site and said, yeah, I think I can do something. So she did Artists for the Birds with her graduate students. They came up over several weekends. We had some volunteer, and they created these sculptures all throughout the forest, Artists for the Birds. We had signs up. And we actually hired the Audubon Society to monitor the bird nesting and foraging to see if this was okay. And the birds loved it, the public loved it. It was an opportunity to talk more and help people sort of engage in that conversation about, like, what is a forest? Is it natural? Is it cultural? Is it human? So it was really great. And then over time, this went away. This is a project that we did at Fort Mason with the Gagosian Gallery and Giuseppe Pannoni. This is his sculpture, La Logica de Vegetale. And we did this because on the lower right there, you can see all those trees in the distance? This is another tree issue. We had to cut those down because, the Park Service had to, because again, they were dying. There were some wind throw issues with them. People hate that, do not want that, So we engaged with the artist and the gallery to put up some of these sculptures, which are not actual trees. They're replicas of trees. Sort of fanciful, but really, again, to get people thinking about, like, what is nature, what is culture, what belongs somewhere, what doesn't. And we did signage that talked about his artwork and then also the trees of Fort Mason, what kind of restoration was going to follow. And this one we actually ended up extending for longer because it was actually up and COVID hit, and we couldn't take it down. And also, though, as we all know, who work in parks, people were going to parks and this was people were sort of finding real joy in this during COVID. They would hang out on the logs, they would sit and chat. We did a series called Tunes on Trails. So again, just in terms of scale, Dee Hibbard-Jones, she was a faculty member. We provided a little bit of money for them to, she did this as part of her class. We provided their like transportation expenses up. It was very inexpensive for us to do. Giuseppe Pannone, also pretty inexpensive for us to do because the gallery took on the expense of installation. So we had to provide the staff time to look at sort of the engineering of how these would be installed and the safety, but we didn't pay for the sculpture. Tunes on Trails was another kind of problem solving. We had some new project sites that we wanted people to start visiting and going to, and others that we really wanted to activate. And we had thought about like what kind of more music can we do, because thinking again about this communal experience and singing together is something, or listening to music live in an audience is something people love. So we had Tunes on Trails, and we had it sort of like a mystery, like you're going to hear somebody if you show up at this place. And some people actually came as a result of the publication and promotion that we did, but some people just happened upon. And so this was, and again, really pretty inexpensive for us. Like, one of our park service, I knew his son was in this singing group and that they had spring break. And I was like, any chance they might come out to San Francisco in spring break and just like sing around in the park? And he's like, I don't know, I'll ask him. So he did, and they were like, yeah, that would be awesome. And so this is a cappella singing the Whiff and Poofs from Yale. But it was just super cool and fun to see how awesome, like how much fun just people in the park there had. And sometimes if it was a song they recognized, they would start singing along with it. Very serendipitous. This is one that we did with a group called Pian Francisco. I think this one cost us about $3,000 to pay for the piano movers to bring pianos in. And we had pianos on all 4 levels over the course of a weekend. And this was, again, part of getting Fort Point more on the radar of people. Like, it's a really incredible, if you've never been, it's right below the South Tower of the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge actually was redesigned to preserve that fort because of the incredible architecture, which is a form of art. And so I'm a copier. I like to copy. So we had something, flower piano in Golden Gate Park. And I was like, that's a fun idea. So contacted Pian Francisco, and they were like, yeah, we would love to do that. And so this was over a weekend, and we had the highest visitation both days that the fort has ever had from that 2-day event. It was just a 2-day event. They came, they moved the pianos in, and part of the reason for that is you cannot keep pianos outside there in that marine environment for very long. But we had professional pianists who came. The rangers actually worked with them to talk about like what was music of the era, different eras of the fort. So they played that, and then in between, whoever wanted to sit down at the piano could. Then we have the projects that are addressing an important contemporary issue that we think our park is especially sort of positioned to explore with the public. So I'm part of this group that's with the State Department. It's called the Innovation Station. It's kind of super interesting, people from all over the world. And I was at one session with them that was all about climate, and it was climate scientists and writers and artists and different things. And one of the things the climate scientists said is that our challenge with climate change is not a crisis of science or a crisis of technology. It's a crisis of imagination. we need to help everybody, all of us, imagine what could happen on the negative side, but the positive side, help them really understand and to connect in an emotional way to climate issues, ocean pollution issues, etc. So this is a project that we did with a group called Building 180 and the artists Geraldine Stockdill and Justina Salnikova, called Blue Whale. Our partner was Monterey Bay Aquarium. This is a blue whale, life-size blue whale that they made all out of recycled plastic. And it was really, really incredible how engaged people got and how people would be like, oh my God, I didn't know, like standing under the size of a blue whale, and really had never thought about plastic. We had people leave and say like they were going to go do like a plastic inventory for a month at their house of how much plastic they used. It was really cool. There's actually a book out now. A lot of you probably have heard of it, called Your Art on Brain, how the arts or Your Brain on Art, how the arts transform us, by Susan Magsamen, I think is how you say her name, and Ivy Ross. It's really great, but it's all about the science that's really new about how engaging with the arts, whether doing the art, just being in presence with art, actually changes our ability to relate to one another. I mean, neurologically, physiologically. So I think it's actually really exciting, because I think of parks as like the public square, the civic place where we really have an opportunity to engage with one another and to facilitate conversation and inquiry, and better understanding, and hopefully maybe affect change in a positive way. So Blue Whale was great. We had people come and kind of just like set up events there, school groups. Like I said, like we had a whole group from one of the public housing projects who just on their own organized a trip to come get inspired for their recycling program in their buildings. This is just installation. I show this just because, again, this is always something to think about. Like, what is really, like, what are you talking about when you're installing? Like, for this particular thing, it was like, how heavy is it? Where is it going to go? What kind of utilities are under the ground there? And how are we going to manage visitor safety when we have like cranes and big forklifts and all those kinds of things going through. Immigrant Yarn. This one we did in 2017 with an organization called An Activist and the International Rescue Committee. There was a lot happening, you may remember, around immigration in the United States at the time and what was happening with immigrants. And Fort Point actually was sort of the witness to most immigrants entering California for many, many, many years. And we thought this could be an interesting place. And the question for this project was, what if you could get immigrants and their descendants together to create something beautiful that would stand as a metaphor for their contribution to our American identity? And what if you could build community around this idea? And what if you could then sell these artworks and donate the money to help immigrants? And so that's what this project was about. 600 people from all over the world, really, literally, like almost every single state, many times over, plus South America, Central America, Europe, Africa, Asian countries, created yarn artworks, knitted, crocheted, sent them in. They were put on these plinths and then kind of spread throughout. And we had a big map of the world in the sort of entry area with pins and strings, and people could talk, like put their pin where their family came from. And the conversations that engendered were really, really powerful. And I think a lot of people, people who were like, I never really thought about the fact that my relatives came from here or there, you know. This is the portal at Crissy Field that we did with Shared Studios. This was a fairly inexpensive installation. It's not big, you can see it's a shipping container, but it was very cool. We actually had the solar power for it was donated by a company called Luminalt that we reached out to, and the portal was connected to 12 other portals around the world. And you could go into the portal and you could meet people from Rwanda and Mexico City and Russia at the time, and all over Iran. So it was really, really amazing. People would go in. Sometimes we had sort of curated conversations, like this one on the right with the park, our chief of interpretation, Michelle G., was with other park leaders from Rwanda who were trying, like, rebuilding parks there, you know, since the genocide and the civil war there, and what was that like. So there was professional interaction, there were kids, there was the theater performances that were shared across. But one of the things, so it was like building community sort of across the seas, you know. But one of the really cool things about this was people who came there together, a lot of times they didn't know each other. You know, they would just be like, oh, here we are in the portal together. And then they would start talking to each other. And then all the, like, connection that they would make, like, oh, you work in this, I work in that too, I had no idea, let's go have coffee. And so it was this really interesting kind of just way for people, it was almost a tool for people to start engaging with strangers, you know. So, any questions so far? No, okay. Here's another, there's somebody here is a musician or teaches music. There you go, okay. All right, well, we have done some musical stuff. You saw the Tunes on Trails. I don't know, do you know John Luther Adams? Okay, he's a very experimental contemporary composer and musician. This project was part of Tunes on Trails. We did it with SF Jazz. This piece is written to be performed outside, and it is written to be performed by between 9 and 99 percussionists. So I'll show you the video. So we did this at Land's End in San Francisco.
Inuksawit is a piece about place, not about a specific place, but about every place, about here and now. It's a kind of echolocation or GPS system for paying attention. It's an invitation to slow down, open our ears, to listen to as many sounds as we can at once around us. I'm just another kid in the enchanted forest. There's no illusion that I could control it. music is not what I do so much as it is how I understand the world.
It's hard to explain a musical piece, but one of the reasons I wanted to show this, so again, this was part of the Tunes on Trails project, and part of that was, just sort of planning for it and thinking it through. It was just like reaching out to musical arts organizations in the Bay Area and just saying, like, we want to do this. Do you have any ideas? Would you be interested? And they were like, oh my God, it's perfect. We have this person that we want to bring here, and it's performed outside, and haven't known where we would do it. And they thought, the SF Jazz thought, and we thought, he's a pretty obscure artist, musician. There was some promotion of it, but they thought there'll be 200-300 people. So we were like, okay, that's totally manageable, 200-300 people with, the other several hundred that'll come throughout the day, just sort of the normal visitors. Well, it was crazy. It was crazy. Like, you can see, I don't know, this was viral spread and social media and whatever. We were not prepared for that. We were not prepared. You can see people are sitting in, a lot of these are restoration areas. We had staff, Sabrina Bedford on the right, she was also an Art in the Parks intern, and now she's doing this professionally on her own. She went back to arts, she's an artist as well. She got her master's in fine art. And, but I think we had 6 of us that were there, plus SF Jazz had some people. And we were oh my God, going around, stop. We were getting people in the audience to be okay, you need to guard this area, not let people through. So it's just something, I point this out because it was amazing. People loved it. It was beautiful. People have come back to Land's End since then and said, I pay attention to what it sounds like here all the time now because I was there that day. I listened for the wind. I listened to what the birds sound like. So it was really great in a lot of ways, but we needed to prepare a little bit better. So I'm just...
Was there I always, because I've been to some large venues and some in San Francisco when there was not enough porta potties, and this becomes a big deal.
Yeah. We actually have permanent restrooms at Land's End. The Park Service does, and then we also have permanent porta potties at one of the other parking areas there. So that was generally okay. But people couldn't get by on it was crowded. It was wacky. I was like, I'm going to get fired. So, luckily I didn't, but okay, now we're going, so Nook Suite was sort of the beginning of the weird and wonderful, but you can see it was also kind of part of problem solving. I mean, these things, they sort of are everything. This is Theo Johnson, the Strand Beast. He's a Dutch artist. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work at all. Yeah, I see one thumbs up. So this was just I read an article I think it was in the New Yorker about him. And I was like, oh my God, I want to get a Strand Beast on our beaches somehow. I just thought it just sounded so cool and interesting and relevant. relevant in terms of the whole, we were talking before about important issues. The Strand Beast, he originally developed it to sort of investigate and think about climate change, sea level rise, creating these creatures that could move sand back to the dunes and, you know, rebuild the dunes, but also sort of a project in like physics and just making. And so when I heard through a friend of mine that works at the Exploratorium that they were going to bring the Strand Beast to the Exploratorium, I was just like, can the Strand Beast come? And the artist, he was very excited. He really, he wanted his beast to be in their natural environment, not inside a building. So, and the really great thing about this is the Exploratorium has a whole group of young people talking about parks as learning labs, who are called explainers that interact with the public. They're all young people from around the Bay Area. And then we have a program, those are the kids in the purple, who are part of a program called Inspiring Young Emerging Leaders. So those two groups worked with us in the Exploratorium and the artists to kind of bring the Strand Beast, learn how it was built and created, help operate it. You can look up Strand Beast at Crissy Field. It's fun to see. And again, it was free for us to do this, other than just some staff folks. We and the Exploratorium just did say, like, do you know what a Strand Beast is? Do you want to find out? Come and see it walking. But it was kind of just that. And we had tons of people show up for it, and it was super fun. Oh, I do have a video of it. You know, you'll notice this part, there was a little logo in the bottom that was MPS 2016, that was the centennial. So again, this was part of the centennial, was just engaging the arts to celebrate the national parks. But one of the things that, again, kind of similar to the people who were at Land's End, the number of people that I've run into when I'm down there, like, I think these sort of serendipitous, joyful experiences in parks that are also like kind of unexpected and sort of shake you out of your sort of normal, you know, I see people trudging along the Crissy Field Promenade, you know, barely looking up, they're like doing their, so these little moments give people a very emotional connection to the place that is really memorable for them. And it makes them appreciate it more. I don't know, but I like to think it makes them care about it more, think about stewarding it more. So I think these are important, is what I will say about that. Okay. Okay, again, weird and wonderful, but also kind of problem solver. And not weird, but Mark DeSuvro, famous artist, many of you know, sculptor, and again, when I said like it can be curator driven, sometimes donor driven, this was sort of like a happy confluence of like donor interest, curatorial interest, park interest, museum interest. So SF MoMA was doing a major addition and renovation, and they were having to take a lot of their work out of the museum because they weren't going to have a lot of the museum. So they had this museum on the go concept. They needed places to do this. We have places outdoors. We had some donors that were really interested in this concept, and then the airfield, which is that big expanse of green at Crissy Field that was restored when the whole site was restored almost 25 years ago now. It was an airfield. It is like heavily underused. It's like the least busy place in the whole park. And we wanted to see if there was anything we could do to get people there and start using it. So this just provided an opportunity for us to just put something out there, humanize the scale of the airfield a little bit, and observe what happened and how people used it. And people, you can see, I mean, people started picnicking out there, kids started playing out there, hawks were perching on these things. So this is, it was connected to the park mark. The color of the steel beams that he uses are reflective of the bridge, and he's attached to that color because he actually immigrated to the United States through the Golden Gate Bridge. So that has been a very salient memory for him throughout his professional life and his creative. Andy Goldsworthy and the Presidio we started these in 2008. These actually are semi-permanent. There had to be a whole really involved permitting process to allow that to happen. But these pieces do a lot of different things. The Presidio was really at the stage of really becoming a national park. It had been transferred to the National Park Service when the military base closed, but really wanting to engage people in the parkness of the place, not just the military part of the place. So Andy, we actually have the largest collection of Andy Goldsworthys in North America in the Presidio, which is kind of fun. There's actually one other piece that I don't have any really good photographs of it because it's actually an indoor in a facility, but this is called Earth Mall on the left, the spire in the middle, and Woodline on the far right. And Woodline was actually, we had just restored a new trail there, well, an old trail, but restored it, Lover's Line. This was a really nice way to sort of bring people to that area. People have so much fun on it. They walk, they play, they picnic on it, they build little forts around it. The spire is interesting, again, a tree thing, because the Presidio forest is an even age stand that was all planted by the military. It's a cultural resource, not a natural resource. And it's all the same age, and it's all dying. The Monterey cypress trees are getting to their end of their natural age limit, and so the Presidio Trust about almost 20 years ago started a forest management program where they cut down parts of the forest and then replant. But they're sort of doing this in spots so that over time it will become a multi-age, canopy, and it won't all die at once. But again, people do not like that, and they want to know. So this spire, which is made from all of the cut trees from this area, is the height of an adult Monterey cypress tree. And it was built, and then the babies were planted right after it was put up. And when the babies get to the height of the spire, it will have fallen down by then. So that is kind of part of the story there. Any questions so far? Comments? Yeah.
One thing I think is really beautiful about the pieces that we're seeing today is that they're not so much, they are about like bringing in dialogue and discourse to the parks, but there's certain kind of communal functions about how we relate to place and land. So like you're saying, the trees are being taken out. That's a loss to the public. It's not that they just don't like it, but it physically lost. It's a loss of membership. And so then there's some kind of ritual that takes place through art in which people can commemorate their loss. And that's, things like that are repeated throughout all of the examples that you're showing. There's this way in which people are keep living their life through the parks, with the art helping them commemorate, celebrate, or memorialize the aspects of place that they love about that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. Oh.
You know, I just want to remind us all that every place in California, you know, we're walking on the ancestral lands of people who've been here for 1,000 and 14,000 years. And when you look at the ceremonies, the historical ceremonies and dance and all of those things, in a way, everything that I've seen is sort of a continuation of that. And the work that state parks is doing, the tribes around the state, is to really re-engage that deep time culture and language and arts and knowledge, and basically reconnecting that with these public lands. And part of my hope is that what we do with tribes now is together create partnerships that actually move on into the future with that deep time, and as a part of that trajectory, the work that you all do, really combining that and really creating a future is what it is. And also a future where we've got this gap where these ancient cultures have been dismissed. And you'll hear about us renaming a place with a Native American name. Up north, there's a place, a park called Sume. But for many years, it was called Packers Point. And yesterday, I was giving a keynote speech for the Salmon Restoration Fund, and there was some Yurok folks sitting right in the front row. And I talked about how we renamed it Sume. And one of the Yurok leaders raised his hand and goes, "It's always been Sume." Right? So you see what I mean? The opportunities that we had, and I thanked him. I said, okay, if you just saw me get, school, and we have to be available for that. And I just think that, thank you so much. This is really beautiful and perfect, Kate. Really it is. And I just think that this is also an opportunity for us to frankly be vulnerable. And we don't know what your experiences are going to be. And that's the thing that I'm just totally
Yeah, super. I'll have more to say on that as we get to the end, because I think it's super important. It's the book, Your Brain on Art. It's interesting. They spoke at the Commonwealth Club. I think it might be online, like their talk, if you want to don't want to read the whole book. But they talked about in the book interviewing like Hopi, like a lot of different indigenous Native American Indian tribes leaders. And in most of their native, like indigenous languages, there is no word for art, because it's so just a part of how they live and connect with the earth, with the place, with one another, and there's a lot to be learned from that. Yeah. So, okay. So, at large, Ai Weiwei and Alcatraz. This is probably the biggest thing we've ever done. And this is really about, these are kind of getting to the transforming a sort of stereotypical common idea about a site and showing people that it's something different, and using that sort of like, I guess, shock of recognition that it's maybe not what I thought it was, as a way to really get at deeper meaning with people and open them up to that. So we did this in partnership with the Foresight Foundation, Art About Place. We've done several projects with them, bringing people to Alcatraz Island. We all know, many of you, maybe, I think we all know, most people think of Alcatraz as like a tourist trap. They might think it's part of Fisherman's Wharf. don't want to get stuck in the tourist trap. They might go, like California, San Franciscans in particular, Bay Area, like if they have a relative coming from out of town, they might go to Alcatraz, or maybe they went there when they were a kid. But we wanted to help people. We wanted to change the narrative of what Alcatraz was all about. Up until we did this show, it was all about the gangster era, criminal, the Birdman of Alcatraz, mostly, the escapes from Alcatraz, the movie history on Alcatraz. Somebody mentioned Disneyfication of something earlier, but that was kind of the idea, and we really needed and wanted also more local people to think about coming to Alcatraz, because it's an important economic revenue generating engine for the Golden Gate National Recreation Area and the Parks Conservancy. We run all of the tours on the island. So we wanted to explore reflecting on values of freedom of expression, human rights, detention, and why certain people are detained and why others aren't, and what are the rules around that, and what is the role of the National Park Service in facilitating public dialogue around those issues. So this is the typical experience on Alcatraz, like crowded cell house, people are wearing their headsets, they're looking at dummies of prisoners through the things. I mean, it's the audio tour is fabulous. If you haven't done it in a while, I highly recommend. But there's a lot of other stories on Alcatraz. This is a group of Hopi Indians that were detained on Alcatraz in the 1880s because they were protesting the removal of their children from their tribal lands to go to kind of re-education, Westernification, if that's a word. So they were taken to Alcatraz and imprisoned there. Alcatraz is also the site of the occupation of the island by the Indians of all tribes in 1969, 19 months of occupation of the island. And it was really one of a few critical moments that started the contemporary Native American civil rights movement in the United States. Super important history. So we were working with this, like, the old prison, right? And actually, Cheryl Haynes, who's the founder and curator of Foresight, and I were sort of sitting out on top of Fort Point after a project and talking about, like, well, is there anything else we could do? And we were looking at Alcatraz. It was like, there's such an opportunity there. She's like, I know who would be a great artist, and that was Ai Weiwei, because his work is a lot about these kinds of issues. So this project was all new commissioned works. He had never been to Alcatraz before. He's, there's the whole sort of stereotypical artist with, temporary, like certain things that have to, like, he would not do it if he couldn't have some part of the exposition actually in cells, because he said you can't go to a prison and not and see, like, how could you do a project on a prison and not? Well, we could not disrupt, from our guidelines, the normal sort of visit, the primary visitor experience at the time, the primary visitor experience on the island. So we had to figure out, like, well, are there cells that we could use, and how would we direct the public through that? We were working with an internationally known dissident who politically it was challenging. We had to actually ask for permission from the Secretary of State to do this project, which we did. That was Hillary Clinton at the time. And I remember we got the approval the day before Thanksgiving, just under a year before we opened. So it was pretty crazy. There was no electricity in a lot of these places at the time. So these are sort of the challenges of working in a non-traditional site, let's say. But Weiwei did develop these works, and we started installing them, and it was a challenge. This refraction on the left is a giant bird wing. It had to go in, just outside those windows are nesting cormorants and gulls. It's a protected seabird nesting site. They can't be disturbed through noise, etc. I think I mentioned this before, but in many ways, like the installation and how it was done and managed was almost actually like an artwork in itself. The technical creativity that the installation teams used was really amazing. This is installation of blossoms. He was like, how am I going to use the hospital wing? And there's only old toilets and sinks and bathroom facilities mostly in there. This is the assembly of Trace, which was 136 portraits of dissidents from around the world who are in jail and detained because of their expression of it's a freedom of speech thing. They express their dissatisfaction with the current political situation. Edward Snowden was featured in this. Chelsea Manning was featured in this. So again, this was, for the Park Service, a big risk in a lot of ways. Frank Dean, the superintendent at the time, would come in regularly like, do we know who the dissident, do we have the names yet? And I was like, no. And the good thing is that the Park Service and this is the artists, this is what the artist is saying. It's not what the Park Service is saying, it's not what the Conservancy is saying. But one of the really awesome things about this was that we were able to engage locals in the creation of these artworks. So the portraits actually came in. It was a box of Legos with a map of what the portrait was supposed to look like, and we had secret location, which was the Palace of Fine Arts, which I'll tell you now, where we had assembly going on, and we had volunteers from all over helping using the map to assemble. And at one point, Cheryl and the other sort of project manager were like, this is too slow, we're not gonna make it. And I was like, you guys need some 10-year-olds to do the Lego, because they're they can follow the instructions and they know. So they did. Those are my kids. There's some others, but they were the fastest ones, super focused on it, did it all right, didn't make mistakes. So these are some of the artworks that are installed. I'm not showing you all of them. You can see them all online if you're interested, but stay tuned. This is an audio work, which was basically just listening, going into a cell and listening. There was one of Martin Luther King's speech from when he was, in prison detained, was there, different. It was spoken word and music. Blossom, which was in the hospital ring. This is Trace again. With Wind is the giant dragon kite, which was pretty iconic, all about flight. But also about this project that was cool is it was heavy in topic in a lot of ways, but also beautiful and joyful. Legos, how can you kind of not engage with Legos or a kite in some ways in a joyful way, and the just conversations, the interaction of the public there. I think one of the things that's maybe a little different than a museum in a national park is you're supposed to you don't have to be quiet, you don't have to, you're not. So people would really engage with one another. This was called Yours Truly, and this was the last piece that people came to. It is postcards, one for every person represented in trace. So each postcard is one of those people, and it's the flower of the country, the like national flower of the country they're from. And people could sit down. This is the dining hall. It's actually where prisoners used to pass notes, and there was some writing stuff in there, and they could write to one of the prisoners they could choose. And 93,000 people did that, and would have conversations with one another. Why are you choosing this person? Talk to each other about it. People would be weeping. We actually had to get like tissue boxes up there. So this is just, you know, some of people there, tons of social media posts. Swag, of course, is for sale. I think we sold like 50 or 70,000 items as a part of this. But it really did help us. One of our goals was getting people to think about Alcatraz differently, think about it as a place to go. Like people would say, I went to see this show, but then I actually was really amazed by the place itself. You asked about what else?
Yeah, I was hoping it would, I mean, I knew it was probably kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing, but I was hoping about more.
So one of the things that changed, and this is, you'll be happy about this. So when we started this project, the Park Service was very nervous and was like, we get 1.5 million and 1.7 million people. They go there they have a certain expectation for what they're going to get. They're going to learn about, the gangsters. They're not going to want to engage in this way. It's too intense, it's too heavy, it's too whatever. People loved it. Kind of going back to that communal experience that's meaningful. We didn't get, we had maybe 10, maybe 15 sort of like negative comments. We had over 900,000 people that saw the exhibition. So the Park Service, as a result, decided to rethink their whole interpretive mission for Alcatraz as a result. And so now there's something called Alcatraz Vision 2030. One of the things that's part of Vision 2030 is to have permanent art programming on the island that will rotate and change to really lean into more about the Native American history on the island, to lean more into issues of incarceration in our country, and use the island as a way to have people think about that. Foresight did another one with us, Homeland Security. Weirdly and ironically, there's actually a Homeland Security station at the Golden Gate Bridge. And when we did this show, we had to call them and say, it was like, we're doing this, is this okay, do you have any problems with it? But this was really, again, about like, how do we define home, and how do we define place, and what makes us feel secure or not secure? And again, this is like, people see these military, old military relics or ruins. They think of World War I or World War II, and that was kind of it. But we really wanted to change how people thought about these spaces and use the spaces to get them to think about these issues of security and that kind of thing. So we opened it up. This is on the Presidio Coastal Batteries. The night before the opening, we had some graffiti on the batteries, Ohlone Sacred Land. And to the Park Service's credit, which is interesting, because normally park management agencies do not like graffiti. And it's a hard topic, right? But it was a really important message that actually went with this show in an important way. So it was left.
Is it still there?
Yeah, it's gotten graffitied over. But
I have to say, in state parks in LA, we are actually preserving area specifically for graffiti.
Yeah.
It's a place called Bow Tie and other things. So
That's
there's a bunch
great.
of changes happening.
Yeah. I think that's good. I want to learn more about that. So these are like, you know, the relics. They've always had closed doors. People always want to know, like, what's in there? What's it like? What was it like? So we opened those all up. This is Dohosa, Someone. These are not specially commissioned new artworks. This was looking for artists and artworks that would speak to the themes of this particular show. Again, all the bunkers were open. They had different things in them. On the left is this is a piece called Pillows by an art kind of duo named Diaz-Lewis. They were really interested in the ICE policy at the time, which required the United States to keep 34,000 people a day in ICE detention beds in order to like get all the right funding and all that. It was just a number. And so they set out to make 34,000 pillows, one for every bed. And these pillows are made, they make some, all of these are, it's donated material, fabrics, a lot of it is from immigrants or recent immigrants. But we had sewing machines on site, and people could make a pillow and add it to the artwork. So that was really meaningful to people, well received. Terza Basel Concourse, this is about going through, security at the airport or the train station or whatever, which if you're as old as I am, you remember not having to do at one point. Alexia Webster, photographing refugees at this studio, like makeshift studio that she set up, but these are folks who've been displaced from their homelands. Michelle Pred, these are all stuff that was confiscated by TSA security. And it's like, these are the dangerous items. Like, why is that? What does that really mean? So back to Alcatraz, we have had some other things at Alcatraz since Ai Weiwei. Future IDs at Alcatraz was Gregory Sale is sort of the curatorial artistic ally, and this is a social practice art piece with also art in it, and it's really about, so there were a lot of people that contributed artwork, but sort of thinking about in new ways rehabilitation and re-entry after incarceration. So again, this is kind of leaning into the opportunity that Alcatraz presents. When most people go there, they have never been to a prison before. It's probably the first and only time most people will ever be in a prison. And it is very kind of profound when you're there to sort of experience that. And I think for a long time, the story of the island was told from the perspective of the guards. And this is sort of flipping and turning it and talking about it from the perspective of the folks who are incarcerated and their families and other people who are also impacted by that incarceration. This was done also with the American Recidivism Coalition, and included a lot of, so the story here, which is pretty neat, is Dominic Bell, who's one of the people that Gregory worked with really closely at the beginning, who was incarcerated and was released from prison after 20-some years when California changed its rules around life imprisonment for people who were either given life sentences as juveniles, or it was for a few other things, like get kind of 3 strikes reasons. But he was really advocating for prison reform, and he went to the state capitol, and he was meeting with the state senator, and he's like, I know you don't have a lot of time, but let me just show you something. And he pulled out his prison ID, and he said, when you're in prison, this is all you are. You are stripped of your identity, and you are given a number and your prison ID. And then he pulled out his ID from college, where he was currently enrolled, and said, this is my identity now, this is the difference. And so that became the idea for engaging folks who are incarcerated around creating their own identity, a future identity out of prison, and then getting people who came to think about that too. So there was an instruction, you create a future identity for a dream job, a role in society, or a role with family, such as father or mother. These are some of the portraits. These are the IDs that were created by people that worked with him over a few years on this project. We had almost 100 of them. Most of these people are now out of prison, doing really incredible work. But we had a whole series of public programming around this. This is the Actors Gang Studio from LA. On the upper right, we did workshops with the California Corrections Department and the Public Defender's Office, the Parole Board, community groups that work with families of incarcerated people and formerly incarcerated people. We asked visitors to come to make their own ID. Like, imagine if you were defined by the worst thing that you ever did, that was it. What would that identity be? And now create a new identity for yourself. With our most recent thing, which is Back to Artist as Problem Solver. Fabiana Rodriguez, we started working with her as part of a pilot program that we did with the Presidio Tunnel Tops, which is 14 acres of new parkland. We worked with this bunch of different community leaders, asking them to help us make sure that when that new parkland opened, that it looked and felt like the diversity of our Bay Area, because we know from a lot of research that our national parks haven't always served all communities well, that a lot of people don't feel safe or have felt excluded, and we really wanted to make sure that this place had a different feeling when it opened. So Fabi was an artist, and she was a Presidio activator. This is her artwork. One of the things that came out of that was, well, we have to make sure that people know where they are, and where they are is on the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. And so the park, instead of having a welcome to the tunnel top sign or a traditional thing, this is what people see when they enter the site. It's the very first thing they see. I'll show you a very short video and then we'll go.
For me, the way that any space can be transformed is through art, and its power is that it speaks to our emotions. I'm Fabiana Rodriguez, and I'm a Presidio activator. I grew up in Oakland, in the Bay Area, in a region full of national parks, and I am the first artist at the Presidio Tunnel Tops. That's very significant. I was very excited to be part of a body that helped shape a future Presidio that was more inclusive and welcoming, especially in the age of climate crisis, when we recognize that structural racism for hundreds of years has left many communities out of national parks. And in fact, communities of color like mine have been relegated to dirty communities, polluted communities. It's critical that we create accessible pathways for everyone to enjoy nature. The Presidio Activators represents a different kind of effort to work with cultural leaders from impacted communities to see how the parks can better serve these communities and how we can rethink these spaces. In order to move forward, we have to look at the past, and that's why my project is titled Ancestral Futurism. My goal in creating this art project was to involve as many stakeholders as possible and to hear different perspectives and voices. And I started by presenting my project to the Presidio Activators, who represent all kinds of communities of color from the region, disabled communities, veteran communities. And I also consulted with Ramaytush Ohlone leaders to get an understanding of the significance of the different creatures that I was depicting. It was important to raise up certain species that had been almost driven to extinction: the mountain lion, the elk, the salmon, the grizzly bear. My goal was to make them colorful and creatures from my imagination that could speak to all audiences, especially to children, so that we can honor that they were once here and hopefully support in their return. I've hardly been to this park before this project. My community didn't have events here. I was never really invited to anything here because it was not a place to gather. To see people of color, families, communities of color, immigrants using the park has to be something that is normalized, and it is a part of how this park functions. People just walk into the art and they feel joy and they express joy and they say, wow, I feel something different. I feel something with color. Color is such a part of so many of our cultures, and now I get to call this park my park. I'm excited about what this park can be, to just invite people from my community and to know that they can hang out on a blanket and look at the Golden Gate while they're listening to hip hop music. I mean, that's like a real dream come true.
These are just some initial ideas for what her artwork will look like. Really beautiful. So quickly, lessons learned. You sort of touched on this, Armando, but projects will develop organically and it's iterative, and just be okay with that. Like, you don't get too stuck on like a thing that you think it's going to be or that you want it to be, because that's actually part of the beauty of the process of working with artists. And I would say almost nothing that I've worked on ended up being exactly what I thought, or even close to what I thought it would. So let go of that. The real work and the insights come from collaboration with the artist, but also with your internal team. Like, we try and engage as many people from the park as we can. Maintenance, natural resource, cultural resource, interp, business office, like whoever needs and wants to be a part of it. And also collaborating with community if that's one of the things you're trying to connect to and use the artwork to connect to. Frame the project around questions and challenges that you want to answer or address rather than describing specifically the project or the activity. If you can, create a process for iterating and testing along the way. Do that. It's super helpful. Just pay attention to the way people behave. Understand your site. Think about how they move through it. Where do they stop? Is there a place to sit down? Are there bathrooms? All of those things are important. The most practical things are often the most critical for successful implementation and the visitor experience. So again, wayfinding, that would be a really good example. Like, how are they going to know what this is? Where to go? How to see it? And again, working with artists is a generative catalyst for new models of interpretation, public engagement, programming, community building, and park experiences. So that's it.
And so this side of the room will go with me first on a tour of the Railroad Museum. And this side, roughly, will stay here and hang out with Kim, who will tell you a little something about Old Sacramento State Historic Park, and also convene with the artist Peter Foucault and do a little printmaking action.